Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We are decoding a title that is, honestly, essentially a manifesto packed into just a few words. If you've ever felt like the traditional structures of education are moving way too slowly for you, or that your biggest, boldest ideas are kind of stuck waiting on the sidelines for some undefined someday, well, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get straight to it. Let me ask you right out of the gate, what does an architect of enterprise actually look like? Seriously, picture it for a second. Are you imagining someone in a sharply tailored suit sitting at the head of a massive mahogany table in some high-rise boardroom? Someone with decades of industry experience, a fancy MBA, and a whole fleet of assistants? Or could it be someone sitting exactly where you are right now? You know, society has a funny way of convincing us that we have to wait our turn, that we need a certain number of gray hairs before we can build something that actually matters. But it's time to shift away from being passive watchers of the business world and become active thinkers about your own untapped potential. I want you to hold that provocative thought in your mind as we really break down our source material today. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the exact phrasing from our source text that we're decoding today, The Architect of Enterprise, Youth Innovation Manual. Now, these aren't just flashy marketing buzzwords thrown together to sound smart. Every single word here carries immense weight and intention. We're going to deconstruct this phrase word by word to reveal a radical reframing of what a student is actually capable of achieving today. When we really look at these terms, we uncover a literal blueprint for flipping the traditional power dynamic. Instead of just accepting the old idea that youth means waiting for permission, this text demands that we fundamentally rethink what young minds are meant to do. Let's start with the very first word, architect. By definition, an architect is a person who designs and guides a plan or undertaking, a master builder. Now notice what is entirely missing from that definition, passivity. Think about your average day in school. You're handed a syllabus, you're told exactly what chapters to read, and you get a strict rubric for how you'll be graded. That's being a passive consumer of information. But the source material frames you, the student, not as someone sitting back waiting to be told what to do. It frames you as someone with the power of intentional design, foresight, and true leadership. You're no longer just living in the building someone else constructed. You are the one holding the pen, drawing up the blueprints. Next up is the word enterprise. An enterprise is a project or undertaking that's especially difficult, complicated, or risky, as well as being a formal business organization. Which is, exactly the opposite of a multiple-choice pop quiz. This is where it gets incredibly exciting. When you pair architect with enterprise, you aren't just talking about turning in your homework on time or memorizing facts for a standardized test. You're creating a conceptual blueprint for building a business from the ground up. You're actively choosing to embrace risk instead of running from it. Think about it. In the traditional academic world, risk is punished, right? You make a mistake, you lose points. But in an enterprise, risk is the very engine of growth and discovery. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer contrast between these two ideas. On one side, we have the traditional school-student construct. We all know this reality. Sitting in rows, quietly taking notes, memorizing historical dates, and waiting patiently for the quote-unquote real world to begin after graduation. But our source text flips the script entirely to youth innovation. This means building businesses and actively solving real-world problems right now, today. It's a dynamic, empowering reality that completely shatters the traditional, passive expectations usually placed on young people. Why should you wait until you're 22 to start solving problems when you have the creativity and the raw energy to start at 14 or 16? The traditional system tells you to prepare. The innovation model tells you to execute. This brings us directly to the subtitle of our source material, which reads, perfectly clear, Innovation in Business for School Students. There is absolutely zero ambiguity here. It clearly identifies you, the school student, as the specific target audience. But more importantly, it identifies the bold, demanding arena you're being invited to enter, and that is business. It doesn't say preparation for business or a theoretical simulation of business. It says business. And this distinction is profoundly empowering. In a simulation, if your product fails, you get a C-. In real business, if your product fails, you pivot, you adapt, and you learn what the market actually wants. The invitation here is immediate, and it is entirely real. You're being asked to handle real money, offer real value, and step into an arena that most folks assume is strictly reserved for adults. So how do you actually execute this? Let's unpack the word innovation as it's presented in this context. It means fundamentally rethinking your limitations. And most importantly, it means viewing your age not as a barrier, not as a lack of experience, but as your absolute greatest asset. Because you haven't been conditioned by decades of how things have always been done, you have this unique ability to generate entirely fresh, unexpected solutions and take decisive action. Think about it. Industry veterans are often blinded by the established rules of their industry. You don't know the rules yet, which means you're perfectly positioned to break them. You can disrupt traditional business models simply by looking at the world through a completely unclouded, highly curious lens. And that brings us to a really fascinating word choice at the very end of the main title, manual. Now, why a manual? Because a manual implies that innovation isn't some elusive, magical spark that only hits a lucky few geniuses who were born under the right star. A manual means there are instructions. It means there are repeatable, observable steps. It frames youth entrepreneurship as an accessible, structured, and highly learnable discipline. If you can read a manual, you can learn to build an enterprise. It takes the guesswork out of the entire equation. It takes what seems like an impossible, terrifying leap for a student and turns it into an actionable, step-by-step reality that anyone with enough drive can completely master. And this brilliantly illustrates the complete roadmap hidden right within the source text. It's the architect's process. Step 1 requires you to think like a designer. That's the architect phase. You look around your community, your school, or your digital world, and you intentionally map out the pain points. Step 2 is where you innovate a fresh solution. That's the youth innovation phase, where you apply that unclouded perspective to solve the problem in a way no adult would have ever thought of. And finally, step 3, build the enterprise. You take that solution and you wrap a real functioning business structure around it. The very words in the title naturally sequence into a highly practical, logical guide for any student ready to step out of the classroom and into the market. So the crucial point is this. When we take all these words from our source, architect, enterprise, youth, innovation, manual, and put them back together after this breakdown, they form a profound and empowering truth. You are the builder of your own foundation. You aren't waiting for a graduation date to get permission to join the business world. You aren't waiting for a teacher to hand you a permission slip to go out and change the world. The text makes it abundantly clear that the tools, the structure, and the capability to build something incredibly meaningful are entirely within your grasp today. The traditional barriers to entry have fallen, and the architecture of tomorrow is completely yours to design. Which leaves us with one final, undeniable question. What enterprise will you architect? The blueprint is there, the manual is open, and the business world is actively waiting for your innovation. Don't let your ideas stay trapped in a notebook or buried in some hypothetical class project. I want you to take this question with you as you go about the rest of your day and really challenge yourself to start building. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and I'll see you next time.